Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Third Eye Awakening. Today, I have with me my beautiful, amazing goddess sister, goddess, priestess, sorceress sister, MarY Grace Theory, affectionately known to all who are in her world at this level anyways, as MarY. So MarY is actually you'll hear it in the introduction, obviously, because I'm going to give a big proper introduction, but she is absolutely instrumental to everything that I create. And we've been working together for over a year. She is like the support person behind my business, behind my podcast, all of my channels, all of the emails go out. She's the one that finds you links and shit when you can't find them. She's just like truly, truly a goddess, and I adore her. But on top of that, she's also like so awake and so brilliant and just very, very like deep as a soul. So I personally am super excited for this conversation because I talk to MarY almost every day. I mean, some days like 3 days go by because I have kids, whatever, but we talk to each other weekly. So we know each other really well, but I still haven't heard MarY's awakening story. So beautiful MarY, thank you so much for being here and giving us your time and your perspective. Welcome to Third Eye Awakening.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to finally get a chance to talk to your audience as myself. I pose that to you sometimes in your DMs. I'm giving, like you said, giving people links or helping people find things and other types of customer service. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. And of course, I love you so much. Love being part of your world. And yeah, where to begin? It's always kind of funny when I tell people
why don't you go ahead?
Well, I was just going to say, it's always kind of funny when I tell people that my first, quote unquote, spiritual awakening was when I was 6 years old and I was in church, because the association is that it was probably related to church, but it was actually just where I happened to be. Yeah. So just a slight little bit of backstory. My mom is like super Christian still to this day. And so church was never optional growing up. It was like, get your ass to church. That was the vibe, like those exact words. And so I remember first of all, I remember as a child, well, I'm a manifestor in human design. So I've always been kind of the rebel, the one questioning everything, questioning authority, and all like just anything that you can imagine. Like people either loved me or they hated me. That's kind of just what comes with having a manifestor aura, which obviously I've come to understand and love truly, but it was hard as a kid. So I was always questioning what's going on, like in Sunday school, even at a young age, and adults would be like, not happy about it. So I'm in church. My mom, like before church, people pray, they like kneel and they do the pray thing. And so I'm 6, I'm just emulating what I see my mom do, but I'm too little to actually rest my elbows on the pew in front of me. So I actually am eye level with that pew where, my mom's got her elbows there. My eyes are what's there. So I had my hands there and I like leaned my face into the backs of my hand and pressed, like my eyes were kind of pressing there. And I'm, in my head, I'm praying. And like, I literally went on a journey, like just like, and I didn't really have context for it for a little while, but it obviously, I did grow up to become an artist and try to portray these visuals that I saw later in life. And it was just full blown technicolor, swirling patterns, just, now what I know to see, like when you take psychedelic substances, usually the first thing that you quote unquote start to trip out on is actually your own eyes perceiving like the actual anatomy of your eyes, like your eyeballs, like your cells and everything like that. So now I have the context and I know that that's probably what I was seeing, but like to a small child, I was like, whoa, like it just blew my mind. And it became like my little I don't want to call it a guilty pleasure, but like when we would go to church, I was like, oh, it's time to put my hands in my eyes and go on my journey. um so that was just, and it was not had nothing to do with church. And I remember like looking up and being like, yeah, like I'm having the experience here, like within myself. And I knew then that it had nothing to do with that environment or those people or what was happening in the church. Besides the incense was lit, like literally and figuratively. Like I love that shit. I definitely think that helped with the journey, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, and it's just that was my first. I call it a spiritual awakening because I was very young. It was very psychedelic in nature, and it was a very young age to realize that I was having different experiences and different beliefs than my family, than my parents, the authority in my life. I was like, yeah, don't align with your beliefs. Like I knew so deeply that and it's not even Jesus, it was more just the church. So that's the first one in a nutshell.
That's amazing that you had that experience, that you just like basically went on a little, well, not, I'm referring to you as little, but like a psychedelic journey as a little person. And I can totally, I imagine that, yeah, I would have been the same way, like, oh, it's church time. Like, but did you feel, I'm also not surprised because honestly, like, I'm lucky. My dad was raised Catholic, but he left the Catholic faith himself. He and all of his siblings, they just left the faith. But he did it in a way that was very neutral. So I never felt any of it imposing itself on me. And I got to just look at the iconography when we went to visit his parents, my grandparents, and then other times when I, would see Catholic iconography, and I got to have my own pure relationship with it, make my own meaning of it. And even though Catholicism is like hijacked as fuck, I feel
Totally.
the purity beneath it. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't exposed to the hijacking, but I've always felt this like, like rosaries feel so full of magic to me. And yeah, little like the Sacred Heart, all these things feel really important. And so I can see how even being in that space as a little child, like it could be very conducive to having that kind of experience. Did it feel connected? Like you said, it had nothing to do with like church, but did you feel any kind of like religious or spiritual connection that you could understand as a 6-year-old?
Well, you know, I definitely always, maybe my name is MarY. I've always felt a connection to MarY and the goddess. And I think that it's really interesting that you also mentioned the Sacred Heart and the rosary, because those two things are associated with MarY. And she to me is like the ultimate in that entire, faith, because like, and it's, her story is so twisted because, in the Bible, or, to most Christians, they believe that MarY was just some chick who was like, approached by an angel, like, hey, what's up? You want to like carry the son of God? When like actually before Mary was even conceived, her mother was preparing to carry a child that could carry, you know, an angelic or a godlike being. So her journey began before she was even conceived. And then when she was born, she was literally trained her entire life to carry Jesus. So, and it just blows my mind that this is left out. Like, it's just like, no, she's just some chick. Like, no, she literally, say that again.
She's just a major chick.
Yeah, just, just ran, they just needed a vessel and that she was the closest person. No, she, her conception and birth is just as miraculous as Jesus's. So,
Well,
and her training. So it's just so of course the rosary holds this magnitude. My most cherished relic from my time in that world is a rosary that my godmother handmade me. It is like I just love it. It's incredible.
wow. I also have like a collection. I inherited all of my grandmother's rosaries when she passed away, and they just like, yeah, they hold so much magic. And to what you were saying about MarY, I mean, I'm not schooled in I don't know the mysteries behind MarY and her mother Anne, but I've had this conversation with Colleen, who's going to come on the podcast in a little while too, about how I just knew in my sort of fertility journey, I remember remembering like feeling so much frustration because I was like, immaculate conception is real. I have done it before. And why can't I do it again this time? Like, why must I have, a male contributor? Because at the time, it felt like my partner didn't want any more children. And so, that was really difficult for us. But it was really strange because that memory came unbidden. And it was like, yeah, it makes me really interested to sort of look into the history of MarY and her mother Anne and how, yeah, the preparation that they both underwent in order to be part of this lineage to like hold a Christed being and bring a Christed being into the world. Yeah, she
Mhm.
can't just be just some chick.
Absolutely
She has
not.
to have a frequency that can do that.
Yeah, parthenogenesis is real. And it is something that takes a lot of training from birth. And, you know, you do, it is, part of the requirement that you remain a virgin and that you are a virgin. It is a virgin birth and it does not require male seed. And it's a lost art. I'm sure there's some goddess out there doing it in the modern times, but for the most part, unfortunately I do believe that it's a lost art, but it's one of the things about women that makes us so powerful that is most likely the reason that that part of the story is omitted. Because how could we talk about someone who's the son of God and then also be telling a story of someone with godlike powers? Those two things don't mix when you have an agenda.
100%. And even it reminds me of like something that came through in the priestess transmissions, which was just that like fertility isn't supposed to work the way that it works. It's not supposed to be attached to the moon cycles. It's a much more anyway, like I totally want to come back to your spiritual way. So I don't want to go too far down a tangent, but just to like emphasize, yeah, that how big of a stick in the spokes of the false matrix is it to acknowledge that, to acknowledge immaculate conception as something that she was not just a passive, whoa, God implanted a child in my womb and I'm just, oh, so innocent.
Mm.
It was an active role that she undertook, and also that it wasn't just her, that there was probably a whole community around her that, how, as you said, it was a path that needed to be walked right from our community, certainly in sisterhood, but there were possibly men that played a role in that too. And how much would that alone, if we truly understood that that was true, if it was not erased from the Bible and like our historic understanding of Christianity and the story of Jesus, it would just that alone would dismantle this whole system because fertility would be then the reproductive power of both men and women and the child that chooses to come in and the community that supports them would be basically emancipated from the lies that bind us. But anyway, that will take me on a whole tangent. So I would love to hear then like how your spiritual awakening progressed.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I do have the Catholic Church to thank for the next one as well. So I went to Catholic school, and even though I was really not feeling it, like I was getting in arguments about church and the belief system with my mom specifically, because my dad actually never forced any of this on me. It was really my mom. She's very threatened by other belief systems. Not so much anymore. She's a little bit more open-minded, and she understands my wisdom. When I was a kid, it kind of scared her. And then as I grew up and she got to know me more, and quite literally I started being her spiritual advisor in a lot of ways. And when she needed, life support, and she would understand, and I get downloads for her, and I share them with her, and I think that she can feel the truth and the transmission, and so she trusts me now. But back then it was a lot of things by force. Like, first of all, I didn't want to go to Catholic school. I didn't want to go to church. We argued about it all the time. So in 8th grade in the Catholic Church, or 8th grade, whatever age that is, 12 or 13, you are confirmed. And I quite frankly don't even remember what the hell it is. It's a sacrament. All I remember is that you get dressed up and all the girls just kind of like judge each other's dresses, and then like you get in a line and the bishop slaps you in the face. So obviously I'm butchering what the actual meaning of the sacrament is, but that was okay, sorry, I need to backtrack a tiny bit. In order to be confirmed, I had to fully convert to Catholicism. I grew up Episcopalian. My mom was like, Episcopalian, not good enough, got to be Catholics. And I had to become Catholic. And so the Catholic church we went to had a congregation of like 1,000 people. And so I had to go to this like ceremony in front of 1,000 people where I had to become Catholic. This was before the confirmation, but it's basically I had like a complete out of body experience. Like I completely exited my body, and it was a huge church. I was floating at the top of the church. They were asking me all these questions. There was only like 4 of us that were converting at that moment, and they kept asking us questions that we had to respond like I will or I do or something. I can't remember, something like that. And my body and my mouth was reciting the proper response. And my soul from above was screaming, "This is a fucking lie!" And I was like, "I fucking hate this. Like, I don't believe in this. Like, get me out of here." And that was like another really intense experience that I had, where I was like, whoa, like, yeah, that was really, I guess that's probably actually disassociation, maybe not a full out of body experience. I don't want to get like, I don't want to be like, if we were to get technical about it, like there's probably someone listening that's like, no, you're just disassociating. I'm like, okay, fine. I was not in my body. It just was like a reminder for me in that moment of like how ass backwards the world is, and how so many of us live our lives according to what other people expect us to do, and we go along with it. And it just was like, I just, it was honestly heartbreaking because I just thought I shared my truth that I didn't want to do this. And I, like, not just once, like many arguments. And it just, I was ignored and I was, kind of forced to do this thing. And like, like nothing's ever either or, it's only ever both and more. It's going to be on my gravestone. But it's like literally, I'm glad it happened now because I have this perspective now and I can look back and I know that like that actually was a critical like pivotal moment in my life that I'm grateful for. But at that moment, I felt so like misunderstood and almost kind of just not trusted by my parent who I had been expressing my feelings toward and was completely ignored. That's never a good feeling. But yeah, and then like it's funny because not to go on too much of a tangent, but like a lot of us when we enter relationships as adults, we are playing out usually a something that's happened in our childhood between us and one of our parents. We like kind of mirror and continue to play out that same role with a romantic partner. And the issue that I keep having with my beloved is that I hate authority. So like he'll literally be telling me to do something, like literally it is for my highest good. It is like because he loves me. He's not trying to control me or demand anything out of me, but like I can't just do it. Like I literally I rebel against any kind of authority. Like it just I'm so bothered by it. And so I've obviously been doing self-inquiry and investigating and I'm like this is why. It's cuz I was forced to do all these things. I wasn't listened to, I wasn't trusted and part of the reason why it was so painful is because I didn't actually really trust that my mom was the adult in the room. It's not that I didn't feel safe with her, but I definitely felt like, yeah, just like that she had some like either mental problems or just like some kind of deficit where I could see that and I could sense it as a child. And I just thought, why are you the authority? Like, no fucking way. And so, yeah, that's like, it's funny how those things kind of carry forward into adulthood. And here I am, 33, and I'm like, my husband's like, don't touch that hot pan. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring forward, and I can definitely see that parallel in my own life too. I think it's like the archetype of, I guess it's like a rebel archetype, right? And it's been the same with me, and it has played out also with in my partnership. Well, I think in all my partnerships, but Alex is the one that matters to me at this time. So, but it's played out where like for some reason I felt like I would always end up in these dynamics with my partner kind of like being the final say in what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like me being like, wouldn't it be amazing to move here? Wouldn't it be amazing to, like have this kind of life? And then they would like put their foot down or something like that as like, no, we're not doing that because this practical reason, that practical reason, which to my mind, we're always just like, from wounded limitations. And it took me a really long time to realize, like into my 30s as well, to be like, oh, I'm just playing out the experience of feeling like I had to ask for my parents' permission for everything and then getting shut down for reasons that I could clearly see were stupid. And then, so then I would just like go ahead and do it anyway, but from this more of an energy of like rebellious, angry, like sort of sneaking something. You know what I mean? Like, well, I'm just
Hmm.
gonna do it anyway. And it even after I realized that, it still took some work to recognize it and repattern it. But it's interesting because when I figured that out, a whole bunch of shit manifested really quickly after I sort of mastered it because I no longer was relating to Alex from that place of my own internal wounding. Like I just wasn't asking for his permission. I was kind of like, I love you and I am creating this for myself and I want you to come and I invite you and there's space for you, but I'm not going to make you do it. Like it was just such a different energy. So it made such a huge difference. So I really appreciate that you brought that up.
Yeah. And, we don't actually want to keep repeating those things. But it's usually our, I don't want to say shame, but it can be our deepest source of shame to keep repeating those patterns. And the thing that you mentioned of like when you're rebelling just for the sake of rebellion in a romantic partnership, it's not a good look. It's not something that I'm actually proud of, but something that's really powerful that my beloved is teaching me, who is also named Alex. What up? We love Alex's. He is just teaching me that actually when you're smart and when you actually are a goddess and you are a leader and you are confident, surrender is actually one of the most powerful things that you can do. It seems contradictory to surrender, but it actually gives you a lot of power. And so it's been interesting to think to like come from this place of the wounding where you keep repeating the behavior and feeling powerless, and then when you course correct and you do the thing that seems like the opposite of what would give you power, and you start to feel powerful. And so that's been a really powerful contrast that I've been experiencing lately of just, okay, like surrender is it's it's the quality of a queen and a goddess. And that's what I would like to embody in this lifetime. And so that is the path for me.
I think the kind of surrender you're talking about, like when you're talking about it, I'm getting this image of becoming like the water instead of being like, I don't know, the rock or the solid plank of wood or whatever. So it's like when we're in that rebellious energy, we create a solidity. We become a wall that something has to bounce off of. And then
Mhm.
if when we surrender, not in a way where like it's not about being like, okay, I'm going to be a doormat and I'm going to let you, like call all the shots or anything. It's more like I'm going to release my perception of the fight here. And I'm going to move into a state of neutrality and a flow. And like, so I guess it's sort of like if you put I I'm like this is probably such a stupid analogy, but I'm just thinking of this like mesh sieve in my kitchen. If I put, you know, a boiled if I boiled an egg and then I pour the egg out through this mesh sieve, the water flows through the sieve because it doesn't it's not solid, but the egg gets caught in the sieve. And it's kind of like that with the framework of our our mindset and our frequency, that when we're rebelling out of those old wounding patterns, that rebellious energy has like a solid form. And so it can't pass through the mesh. It just like must it meets resistance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And when we
Mhm.
move into that surrender energy, we are the ones that are releasing resistance. We're not asking the mesh sieve to become water. We're not asking it to release its resistance. We are just releasing our resistance. And so we can pass right through. It no longer snares us.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And it's funny because this is um I do like I obviously I wanted to talk about entrepreneurship today, but this is like also showing me this mirror that it comes with entrepreneurship, because I feel like for me being an entrepreneur equals freedom, kind of like what you're describing, like the freedom to just go through the sieve or whatever. And the main thing that a lot of people are afraid of when it comes to entrepreneurship are the things like, oh, well, then I have to, figure out my own bookkeeping. I have to pay taxes and I don't like my things are more quote unquote complicated or whatever it sounds like. And that in some way it feels like easier, quote unquote. It feels free. Oh, I don't have to worry about having the perfect, form that I can easily pay my taxes with each year, and I'll pay less taxes because I don't make that much money. And that, for some people, that is like a mental trap that they get into, is like that is some amount of freedom that, like, but it's actually a huge limitation. Oh, I don't want to make more money because then I have to pay more taxes. Like, well, if you're going to make wouldn't you rather have more money even if you have to pay more taxes? Like, come on, y'all. But like, I don't know. That's just kind of like the, as I was listening to you talk about that analogy, I'm realizing just how that is actually quite appropriate also, just in terms of when we really look at liberating ourselves, which to me, one of the highest forms of liberation from the false matrix that we live in is to work for yourself, is to, be an entrepreneur, is to be self-sufficient, is to be a leader, like a self leader, and to master yourself and to know yourself. And so we, you know, like, we can be water and we can flow through the sieve, or we can stay trapped in it and not actually pass through. But think I don't know, I'm so beyond, I'm like so out of it, I almost can't even, like, but I remember being in it and being like, well, this is safer. I just have a W-2 and I plug that into my taxes and then I'm done and I don't pay anything because I don't make that much money. And like, I'm free of this like mental stressful thing called taxes. But then it's like, actually, when you empower yourself and you just do the thing, it's like, what was I thinking? Anyways, that was like a little tangent. Don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, no.
Were you picking what I was putting down?
Totally makes sense. Or I think for me, I remember it being like, but I get like a predictable amount of money every 2 weeks or whatever the pay cycle was, right? And like, I guess that's true insofar as in entrepreneurship, in this venture I've created since leaving, midwifery and then all the other jobs that I had. Definitely there is an element to like, I would say my income is not as steady as I want it to be, but I also know that like it'll get there and it's fine. And whereas before, when I was needing the safety net of having that predictable, income every couple weeks, I was really, really a victim to my own money wounding, which we all have because they make damn sure that we have it. Whereas now I've learned to ride the waves of income fluctuation. And, like we see a lot of money coaches and stuff. I know you and I have talked about this a lot. We see a lot of money coaches being like, oh, and I'm at like, 50K months and 80K months. And like that's all well and good. But what they are speaking to a lot of the time is the part of us that is afraid to be with the uncertainty. But that is where the freedom is when you can be in the uncertainty and be okay, then you're really free. And you don't need it to be something like 80K months. I'm not saying, I mean, like, I would totally welcome 80K months, but I'm also not, I I don't need it to be there in order to be free. But the entrepreneurial journey is what allowed me to get there. If I had stayed in employment and like the false security blanket of biweekly predictable paychecks, I would not have. For me personally, I'm not saying it's impossible for everyone. I'm just saying for me personally, I think I would not have learned to master this energy so that I feel free regardless of what my bank account says or if I have a lot of bills to pay or whatever. I'm just like, okay, it's it's a day ending in Y, and like the money comes in and the money goes out, and the money comes in, the money goes out, and I don't need to know where it's coming from. I don't need to know when it's coming in. It's I'm okay. But I would okay, why don't because I really want to hear how you like your process of starting on your entrepreneurship journey because I really love the way that you see it. It is beautiful and empowering and in high integrity, which is why I continue to work with you. I love it so much. And so, why don't you kind of like tell us about your third sort of awakening experience? And then from there, tell us about the process of going into entrepreneurship and finding that freedom for yourself.
Hmm. Well, I'm trying to think if the third one relates or not, but I could touch upon it briefly. I mean, it's kind of tragic, so I'll just give like a trigger warning. I guess it's a child abuse trigger warning. Yeah, just surgical trigger warning if you're triggered by surgeries and things like that. Yeah, so when I was 15, I was basically, my mom was a ballerina. She's anorexic. And so my whole life, I have been seen, my body has been witnessed through anorexic lenses. And I was always too fat and my thighs were disproportionate and all this other shit. Like it was just, I wasn't allowed in the kitchen. I have three older brothers. They were allowed to eat whatever they wanted. I was given very strict portions. So when I was 15, my mom put me under for liposuction. And it was, yeah, it was literally like the straw that broke the camel's back. I had already had all these, like, I don't really trust you. Like, you're kind of messed up in the head. Your worldview is weird. Like, you gossip all the time, but you love God and you like go to church all the time and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, these things are not matching up. Like, these two things don't make sense. And that was like this moment, like I just remember feeling so violated by the doctor, by the whole experience and all this stuff. And anyways, so I had the surgery and I literally well I so I'm coming off of the anesthesia. And so there again, if somebody wants to be really technical with my spiritual awakening journey, was it an out of body experience? Was it just coming off of anesthesia? Like, you can decide. But I also like exited my body and I felt in that and like this is the sad part is that like what they were like putting me into a wheelchair to like take me home. And my mom said that I was sobbing, crying, and I was saying like, please don't throw me away. Don't put me in the trash. Like I want to be here. Like I was saying all this like, quote unquote crazy like anesthesia stuff. But like my memory is that like I was in the trash can. Like I was thrown out. And it was like at that moment I was quite literally like still somehow psychically or whatever attached to what they had removed from my body that was in the garbage. It was in the fucking trash can. And that was like, I don't know, I wouldn't say I would wholeheartedly call that like a spiritual awakening. It's more of like a rude awakening of like, okay, I'm the adult in the room. There's no more trusting these adults. Like I have to be my own authority. I have to, do my own thing, which was really scary. I had like a complete personality change overnight. Like I went from like gregarious, I wouldn't say like popular, but I was a cheerleader. Like I was spirited to being reserved and angsty and angry and quite frankly depressed. Like I probably would have been diagnosed with depression, but that was another thing my mom like didn't believe in. So there was no like getting treatment of any kind, which whatever, I survived. But so that was a very interesting experience. And what that catalyzed is that I was like, oh, I got to get out of here like ASAP. And so I went on a fast track to graduate high school as soon as possible. And I moved out at 17 and I went to college and I left and I never went back.
I am so sorry that you experienced that. I was listening as as you were saying that, I was just like thinking about my daughter, Kieran, and thinking like, yeah, I mean, I've never met your mom, so I don't absolutely do not want to pass judgment on her. She's a complex, multidimensional being herself. And it's definitely not for me to judge her, but just as I was processing what you were sharing, I was like, I would have to have a psychosis of some kind to treat my daughter that way. Well, I can't even fathom it. Like I just and I mean, I'm speaking this way as your friend and your sister, but like you're so beautiful. And I didn't know that story of what you experienced. And I just look at the way that you hold yourself and you adorn yourself. And I can see the amount of like you have prioritized the reclamation of your worth from the wounding and the scarring of that experience. And it shows even without me having known that you went through that. Like I always have kind of looked at the way that you show yourself and the way you share yourself. And I've always thought like, oh, like MarY's so beautiful and it's like you planted a stake in the ground of your raw natural beauty. And you are just like, I will not change for any years. And I just think that's so incredible that you did that. And I'm sorry. And you're right. Like that, those cells that were removed from your body were no less you than the rest of you.
Hmm.
And yeah, you were psychically like your consciousness continued to be linked to that part of you that was told that it's like redundant and
Not needed.
worthless and to be thrown
Worthless.
away.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. Thank you so much for that reflection, by the way. Really appreciate that because it's like I think I even got like a silly little like motivational email today that was like it said from pain came my wisdom. And that was the moment that I realized I was in charge of loving me. And no one's going to do this for me. I'm the one that has to do it. And even though afterward it was a dark time, I came into self love very soon after that. My next awakening was a mushroom journey in college where, they always say, like, don't look in the mirror, don't look in the mirror. I'm like, what? Like, I looked in the mirror and I was like, damn, I love me. Like, whoa, look at this, like, beautiful goddess. Like, that is who I am. And it was such a positive experience. And I just, I took full responsibility for loving myself. And, obviously it's not like I'm perfect at it. Sometimes it wavers, and especially back then. But yeah, that was, even though it was a really traumatic event that my body is still holding, and like, I do need to, I'm still working on releasing a lot of that trauma from my actual, from my thighs and that whole area. It was a catalyst. So I have to be grateful for it, even though it sucked and it was painful. But it taught me about my true worth, which had nothing to do with the way that I looked. And even though I'm like, I look great. It's like, what was my mom even thinking? And I love my mom. Mom, if you ever listen to this, I love you deeply. I don't blame you for your behavior. You're also very wounded and hurt, and you've been through a lot. And I see that. And I don't hold anything against her at all. I we're all just operating from our wounds and replaying the things that were not resolved when we were children. So, we almost can't help but project and try to replay and reconcile until it either happens, or for some of us it doesn't. And we just, the record skips until we die. But there's those of us who are on that path of like, no, I'm going to do something else. Like I'm not just going to continue playing inside the same groove for the rest of my life. That's not an option. I'm devoted to my growth. I'm devoted to being the best version of myself. I'm devoted to releasing any and all beliefs and reprogramming myself as often as possible, as much as I need to. And even when I get into a mindset that's quote unquote good, continuing to question, continuing to reprogram, and, you know, like, why would I live my life on the factory default settings? Absolutely not. Not an option for me.
Totally. And you just said that so beautifully. And like, I feel like you just, I don't know, delivered like really powerful medicine to all of us of just that self inquiry and refusal to follow the track that was laid out for you, like the easiest track, just because that's the one that you were directed onto. And I feel like it does segue really beautifully, I'm sure, into your process for like furthering that basically and embarking on the entrepreneurial path. Like when did that happen for you?
Yeah. So in college, I studied art, and I am a painter. I mean, I also did like jewelry design, but my main body of work that I created was paintings. And I'm like trying to think, did I try super hard to get accepted into galleries? No, but like when I graduated, I probably tried to get into like 4 or 5, and I was rejected by all of them. But I knew that people loved my art. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm doing my own thing. And I created my own gallery, which was possible because my family owned a warehouse at the time. So we just kind of like put up some walls, and painted them white. And I hung all my art. I promoted my own art show. I sold 47 out of 50 pieces.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I ever made, 5 figures in, you know, a span of about 24 hours. And it just showed me what was possible. So that was in 2014. But even though I did that and I like had that empowering moment, I still was working like an income capped job, with just a steady paycheck and the whatever. And my income was always capped. It was never going to be more unless I did something like an art show. And at that point I was like, it took me 4 years to create 50 pieces of art and then sold them all. It's like, that was, what am I going to do now? It wasn't actually sustainable, but it like showed me what was possible. So anyways, I was probably income capped for over a decade and just always working for other people and truly not understanding my worth. Like, I remember a couple of times being hired for, bespoke art projects or like commissioned paintings or things like that, and feeling so guilty about charging money. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, I look back and I'm like, what? Like, why did this feel so cringe to have the money conversation with people who were literally asking to pay me? And I think that a lot of us, we have those money stories. We have we feel unworthy of money, or we don't realize that what's been modeled for us as kids is like a false reality, like something that my mom would always say when I was a kid, and that she still says, is like, she'll literally say like, I'm poor. And I'm like, and she's not, you know what I mean? So like, those things are happening around us all the time as kids. Like, but who knows what the story was, in your home or in in some people's home. But usually it's skewed. Whatever the money story is, it's not an actual reflection of reality, but we accept it as reality until we deprogram it and, reconstruct something else in its place, and like do that consistently until we believe it. So I felt so much guilt about charging my worth. And yeah, now I just kind of laugh at that. I remember like genuinely feeling really bad about, like, I did like a custom painting 20 feet in the air on a scaffold, took me like a week. And I felt so bad about charging like $1,200 for it. So I like wouldn't even do that for that much. I'd be like, no, not even worth my time. Like a huge painting. So anyways, it's funny. But anyways, so I always had the desire to not have to like wake up in the morning and go work for somebody else. It's probably a manifestor thing, although I don't think it is. I think a lot of people have that desire, especially nowadays where we've all seen, okay, like it's possible to work from home. Like, why would I leave? I know some people like to leave their house. I don't. I love my home. That's where I want to be. I like traveling, but let me tell you, I could go to the coolest place on planet Earth and I am going to be stoked to go home. But anyways, so I I wanted to, I learned about like the coaching world in 2016. And that's really when my entrepreneurship journey started. And even back then, I was like way undercharging. I had a blog, I was talking about self love. I was coaching women, but I still always held on to that steady paycheck job. I couldn't let it go because I didn't trust myself that I could replace my income. I couldn't stay in the uncertainty. But now I realize that holding on to that job is probably why it actually took me so long. Because in 2020, that like quote unquote steady job, I didn't lose it, but they were basically like, we're cutting your pay in half because of the pandemic, da 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 da. And that was the moment when I was like, okay, I am going to take this 100% seriously. And I'm going to replace all my income with my own business, my own venture. And I'm going to stop working for anyone else as a crutch, like, because I'm scared to go out on my own. Like, that's actually what's holding me back, is the fact that I keep holding on to this other shit. And so, like, because imagine, like, like, when you're in the space of like, hey, everything's up to me, it can be stressful or it can be exciting. You can be like, oh my God, everything's up to me, and like just implode and fail. Or you can be like, everything is up to me. Wow, I can create $5,000. I can create $15,000. Like, literally, the sky is the limit. Like, the sky is not even the limit, like, straight up. And so, my coaching business from 2016 to 2020 was called Self Love Medicine. And I was coaching and empowering women to love themselves more, and really like blending that with spiritual counsel, because I'm also, fully devoted to the priestess path and the worship of the goddess, and in all of her forms. Like, I'm obsessed with all of the goddesses, including, the goddess that is present in each and every one of us, even in men. Like, we all embody that archetype, and we have pieces of that archetype. Yeah. And then it was such a success in 2020. Like 2020, I saw the silver lining of the pandemic. Like, people were immediately like, what the fuck's going on in the world, reaching out for help, reaching out for support. And like, I'm not gonna lie, like, it was luck that I was already locked and loaded and ready to go, because I had built it out over the past 4 years. I just hadn't taken it seriously. So like, the moment that everything started going down and people were online more, and I was like on Facebook and I was talking about, self-love and empowering women, and all these women are like sitting at home being like, what is going on in the world? And they're finally actually having a moment. Like, they're not having to go to work every day. They're having a moment to like look in the mirror. and be like, am I even happy with my life? Do I even love myself? And so like I had a lot of really powerful like coaching clients that year, and some that stuck with me, for a full year. And so that was really powerful. And then like right at the end of 2020 was when like I started, consulting and helping other women build their online business. And and then like also kind of on like, I'm an artist, like I paint. So I've also studied graphic design extensively and web design. So I've always kind of like over the years done like website and graphic design gigs, like kind of as bread and butter. And so it really like okay, I had the knowledge of coaching. I am a great coach, know how the online business world works, know how to build websites, know how to do graphics. And so that is how Goddess Support was born. And and then that's when everything just really took off. And I was like, oh, this is my dharma, like helping women, yes, love themselves and be empowered. That's 100% still part of it. But also, like, fuck the system, like, exit the matrix, stop working the shit job, retire your partner so they don't have to work in the matrix either. Like, all of these things became a byproduct of me just doing what was coming naturally and what people were coming to me for. And it's been a really beautiful experience, and I feel very grateful. But it really, yeah, it took kind of, being cut off. I almost wish I could say that I made the decision to like leave my job and go out on my own. But it took the crutch, quite literally being kicked out from under me, for me to take it seriously. But I was primed and ready. It wasn't like totally out of nowhere or totally like, oh, I have to pivot into something else now. It was like, no, I had already had this desire really deep in my heart. And it was just the perfect moment. And yeah, there's no going back. I will never ever work for someone else ever again. I'm hooked.
Totally. I, I'm the same way. Like sometimes I imagine I'm like, well, what if I just went back to work? And I'm like, like I just laugh. I laugh and laugh and laugh. I'm like, Amy, you were never cut out to be an employee ever. It's just not going to work for anyone, any parties involved. But the I think it's amazing that you like what as I'm listening to that, I just feel like, well, of course you didn't. It wasn't time for you to leave that like steady paycheck matrix until it was time for you to do it. And you probably set it up to kick it out from under yourself. You know what I mean? Like it looks
Totally.
like the world did it, but you just set it up as like it was like your switch that like switched you into like, oh, right, it's go time, you know? And so you kind of needed that external manifestation of something happening to like help trigger your autopilot to be like, oh no, something has changed. And so we change with it, you know?
Totally. Yeah. And I just, the freedom, there's just nothing that compares to having complete freedom over your time, your schedule, your anything. Like and I know that that's maybe not how everyone would experience it right away. I definitely, you know, it's entrepreneurship. I absolutely worked, 12-hour days, but once you get it to a point where it's running itself, at least, or you have at least some support members on your team, it's just like I said, it's just not anything that I could ever not do at this point, because like I said, like I'm a homebody. Like getting up and going to a job somewhere outside of my home is quite literally like a nightmare for me. And I know some people it's not. Like they want to leave their house every day. And that's fine. Like more power to you. But you can go on your entrepreneurial journey on like a brick and mortar shop or something, or like You know what I mean? But you don't still have to stay, in the machine or whatever.
100%. And like when you were talking about, when you get it to a point where you have support people on your team, like what that actually equates is often like that means you've hired somebody, you've employed them, and they have a job. And it's like, often as an independent contractor or a freelance person, right? So they still have some, like they're not technically your employee unless that's, the structure of your business and that's what required. But the point is that if it's inside of you to do this, which it was for me for years and years, like I've always known that I was supposed to be on, like I remember buying a course on starting a blog and buying a course on starting a business, and I had no idea what I was even gonna like start those about. I had no idea, like I never started a blog because I didn't know what I was gonna talk about, but I knew that was what I was supposed to do. And but it took me ages to figure it out. But my point is, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I've always known that I'm supposed to create something, then the whole thing to focus on here is that you can exit the matrix that holds you prisoner, right? And in doing so, you can create employment or work opportunities for others as you grow that are also outside of the matrix. Like it's just a beautiful thing when we step onto this journey if we're made for it and just like step courageously and fiercely onto it, knowing that, yep, like it's gonna be it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment when you first do it. But like I said, just for me in creating the opportunities to like really heal money wounding and money trauma, it's second to none. I just don't think I would have gotten there if I had stayed in the sort of steady paycheck kind of realm, because I wouldn't have needed to. I would have just lived within that little box, that little capped income, limited little box that I had accepted for myself. And I would just believe that there's nothing available outside of that. And I needed to challenge that in order to really be confronted with the layers of my wounding. But I would love to hear well, I know what goddess support is about, obviously, because I'm one of your clients, but I would just love to hear you share about goddess support and like what you do and what you offer. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to riff a tiny bit about what you were just saying, the before I kind of hop into goddess support, if that's okay. When you go on the entrepreneurship journey, you, especially in like a service-based business where you are quite literally doing things for other people, it is person to person. It doesn't mean it can't be business to business. Like that's not what I mean. But I just basically what I mean is it's not big business like to big business. You're not like analyzing or like, part of Amazon or something like that. Like you are like the thing that everybody loves about crypto, for example, is that it's a private peer-to-peer network. Okay. But it's all virtual. Like it's all in a computer. When you have a service-based business where you work with individuals, especially something like coaching or like one-on-one sessions like readings or healing or whatever it is, even something like graphic design, you are joining a real peer-to-peer network where instead of passing money to big businesses and corporations and just like people that don't actually give a fuck about humanity, you're passing it to your peers, your actual fellow peers. Like you buy my services, I buy your services. There's no dirty money in that. And so what we're seeing is massive wealth growing in the hands of a lot of people, but specifically women. And for me, that's really inspiring because it's like, we've been waiting for the tables to turn, us women. We're ready to rock. And the thing that's powerful about it is that we're not building masculine businesses that are, taking us away from our families and taking us away from our kids and just turning us into men. That's not the types of businesses we're building. We're building feminine businesses. We're building ones with flow, with time freedom, where we get to be with our kids and we get to, do really powerful work for the collective and help people heal. So, yeah, that I guess that kind of brings me into goddess support. And that is, you know, I'm an artist. And so I believe that life is art. And that if so for me, there have been people that have said to me, like, are you an artist anymore? I'm like, yeah, business is my art. Like having a business is an art. Like my business is a masterpiece. I'm creating my life into a masterpiece. And so if you want to create your life into a masterpiece, like you have to be the visionary. You have to hold that frequency. And the easiest way to hold that frequency of your vision, as I'm sure you know, Amy, is to enlist the support and receive loving help from other goddesses. Because how else are we gonna we need people in our field who believe in us or hear our crazy idea and are like, no, that's not crazy. Like we can make that happen. Like this is actually genius, or like, and this is how it would work, or da 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 da. Like we need, it's like being part of that true peer-to-peer network, like no computers involved, like just human ingenuity and feminine logic defying energy. And so, obviously I work a lot in the coaching industry. I am a coach, and I just saw like this huge need for actual implementation of the things. Like there's a lot of people, they'll hire a business coach and that coach just talks at them and it's like, hey, do this, this, and this, and like they basically still leave you to do it yourself, which there's value in that because then you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. But there's also not value in staying in your frustration, staying in troubleshooting, not actually getting your medicine out there into the world because you can't figure out, tech problem XYZ. And that to me is an issue. Or like, not knowing how to monetize something, not knowing what to charge for it. Like there's all these different things. It's like just because you're not a tech wizard doesn't mean that you can't have powerful medicine for the world. So why should you spend hours and hours and hours learning how to do something when you could enlist support and get it done faster and start serving people now? So I saw this huge need just for actual and like implementation. Like, okay, so I thought to myself, what's the kind of business coach that I would actually hire? And that's somebody who I could talk to, and then they would turn around to a team and they would do it. It wasn't just left in my hands to do it myself. And so that's really the difference in what I offer. That's the magic of what I offer, as well as, mentorship and, whether it's business or life, I'm there. I'm there for my clients. And I've also curated a highly skilled team of goddesses who are ready to produce results for women in business. And they are all self-led. Like I'm the quote unquote boss. I'm the CEO, but really all I am is like the CAO. Like I'm the chief accountability officer. I just make sure that things are happening, but they are all in charge of when things happen. Like I don't breathe down anyone's neck. That works for me. They are all entrepreneurs as well. So yeah, that is what I do. Obviously, I have a lot of women who reach out who want to work together, and in order for me to best serve, I only take on a very limited amount of clients. However, I noticed a lot of repeating questions and repeating patterns and repeating like coaching sessions that I was giving to women when it comes to their business. And I just thought, why am I why am I saying this 6 times in 1 week? I'm going to say this once and I'm going to put it in a course. And then I'm going to, when women come to me with these questions, or they're just starting out, or they know they want to get into online business but they want to come at it as a spiritual devotion. They want to come at it not from like a bro marketing perspective, but from that feminine energy. So I created a whole course, and it is like intensely comprehensive. And you get the best of both worlds, because guess what? I've taken all of the bro marketing courses and I've embodied it by doing a lot of it for myself and for my clients. But I also know how to harness the feminine energy. So Goddess Status is the name of that course. And it's all about like being the goddess CEO of your business and your life. And it's an online course paired with a group coaching experience. So we do live group coaching like over the span of the 16 weeks. So it's a 16-week time investment. I mean, in terms of you're doing most of the modules on your own and on your own time, but then we do gather every new and full moon for group coaching just to riff about life and business, whatever's alive. And it Goddess Status is for the woman who is wanting to have a spiritually embodied business, be the goddess and the queen, take command of her life, but come at it from a spiritual perspective. And so if you're new, or you are, in your first couple of years of business, like still making your way to consistent 10K months, which, $10,000 a month, which by the way is 100% possible. I see it happen time and time again. Before it happened to me, I thought, oh my God, that's going to be life-changing money. And then guess what? It is. And now I'm like, I ain't never going back. So if you're like, wow, making $10,000 a month sounds great, you can do it. Like there's actually no excuse. And I can show you how. So that is my course. It's going to launch this fall. We start August 31st, 2022, but I'll run it twice a year. So, if you're listening to this later in 2022 or 2023, it's always going to be available. And it's really all about business empowerment, but also spiritual embodiment, like embodiment in your medicine, like what you came here to do, and empowerment in your self-mastery. And there's, like I said, it's very comprehensive in terms of the business empowerment, but there's also lots of self-empowerment. Like I have all the human design, like there's a lot of human design modules so you can get to know yourself. We do toning throughout the entire program, which is a throat chakra vocal activation, because guess what? If you want to be a leader, whether it's just in your, if you just want to lead your family, you need to have a powerful voice. You need to really work that throat chakra. So we work on that, and just so many other things. Self-love, obviously, is a big part of it. And it's just, like I said, it's very comprehensive, and I'm very proud of it. So I'm really excited to promote it and call in the women that are supposed to be there. So if you're listening and you're like, yeah, like I'm ready to exit the matrix. I'm ready to fuck the system, whatever you call it. Maybe you call it building the new earth or building the new paradigm. You can do all of those things, and you get to do it your way, and you get to show up as a goddess 100%. So I hope that you'll join me.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as your client, I can say that you definitely know what you're talking about. And I mean, I wish that I had back in 2019, when I was preparing to, I knew that as of like, I guess it was 6 p.m. Eastern on January 1st, 2020. That was like officially it. I was not a midwife anymore. That was the end of my shift, on my last shift. And so I had been preparing in 2019 to do that. And I really wish that goddess status had been something available to me at the time, because I really love what you said about like business as art and business as spiritual devotion. And I feel that so completely, because I also, went to school to become an artist, and I was a painter and a jewelry maker, a ceramicist. I worked with glass, stained glass, blown glass. Like, I'm very, very, very creative. And all of that is fulfilled through business for me. Business is so creative. It's so creative. So as art and also as spiritual devotion, where you're not just in it for the bottom line. Like, you get to have both. Like you said before about, what's going on your headstone, your tombstone when you pass away is like,
Nothing is ever either or. It's only ever both and more. That's
yeah,
like
exactly.
that's my Mad Hatter quote, but it's not a quote from the Mad Hatter. It's my quote.
But it's true. Like, you get to receive money. Like, I make more money than I did as a midwife, significantly more. And being a midwife was very well compensated, which is why whenever I think about, whenever I'm kind of like, oh gosh, I'm tired, because it is, when you are on the entrepreneurial journey, I'm not going to pretend this isn't the case. It does come down to you. And like, for example, I like last night, Kieran woke up in the middle of the night with the croup. It came out of nowhere. We literally shouldn't have a fever, nothing, no runny nose, nothing. And she just woke up with like the most horrible cough I've ever heard, crying and like dry heaving and struggling to breathe. So I'm not well rested. And there are things that I wanted to get done today that aren't going to get done. And these are the days where I'm like, sometimes a little part of me is like, what if I just went back to work? And then I actually think about it and I'm like, never, never. Because I make more money doing this. I have creative freedom and it's in spiritual devotion. So it's not just about me doing something meaningless for money. It's me doing my, like, living out my dharma, my purpose for this life, and then allowing myself to receive money. But I'll say that it's not my natural default setting, even though I'm meant to be a creative entrepreneur and sole entrepreneur. I am not built like you, MarY. I don't have that natural business acumen, which is why it's made such a difference for me to work with you, because I was just like, piecemealing, patchworking it together by myself for a long time. And it was very hard, definitely like 12 to 15-hour days frequently. And I'm so proud of the work that I did. But I also, like, you and I have had many conversations, because MarY's also my coach, my mentor. So like, I can come to her when I'm just feeling like discouraged and down or confused and a lack of clarity. Like, often because of the nature of the things that I'm creating, I feel like lost as to how to talk about them. You guys have all heard me say how many times, countless times, like, I don't feel like I'm good at sales. I don't feel like I'm good at marketing. It doesn't come naturally to me. And yet when I get excited about something, I can speak about it, very passionately, and that part comes naturally. But I can come to MarY and just be like, kind of like, well, I don't know what I don't know what to do. I'm confused and I don't know how to do this. And she has that, like, this incredible balance of like the feminine energy that honors the feminine, honors the creative process and the flow and the intuition and the oracle and the goddess and all of that. But also she has the brilliant, like, she has taken the bro marketing courses, and also, I personally don't want to completely shit on the bro marketing courses. It's just that I'm so feminine that that strategy alone doesn't convert for me. I can't just do bro marketing, but there are important pieces in there that, we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I don't have the time or the bandwidth or it's not in my wheelhouse to learn like all kinds of bro marketing strategy and then pick out what actually fits my business and what doesn't. And so working with MarY is like, she's done all that. She can pull out what actually, like, what strategy is aligned to support this business, which the mission of this business is for me to like be the speaker, be the channel, transmit the transmissions that are supposed to be received by certain people. And that means I need to be visible, needs to be packaged up appropriately. People need to like learn about it, know about it, understand it, and opt into it. And so it's just been incredible to be your client and to work with you. And I feel so supported. And P.S. Muddy did not ask me to like give a testimonial for this podcast episode, but this is just like genuinely how I feel. Like even when I have lean months, like working with goddess support is a non-negotiable expense. Like I'm like, no, there's no way. No, I'm not doing this without Muddy. It's just not happening. And if you're just kind of starting out, like I said, I would have loved to have had goddess status when I was starting to sort of, you know, put me ahead of the game because it does feel kind of lonely at first. And I will also say this too, that if you're starting out on any kind of venture like this, whether it's entrepreneurialism, but I think anything that takes you out of the matrix, anything that like you're choosing to get out of the matrix, you need support. We need support. Like we need healers, we need coaches, we need mentors, we need like, galactic shamans, earth shamans, we need readers. Like we need support in order to
Expand.
yeah, exactly. And because, we come up against scary edges and our nervous system is programmed to be like, I don't know what to do. And so I'm just going to collapse back into my comfort zone because it might not be the best place for me to be, but it's familiar and I know how to navigate it. And I mean, I came up against that edge countless times. And you know what actually made the difference for me to finally make the move and start my business was working with my first coach because she could, tell me like, this is what's happening. And you just have to step past that edge and let it be uncomfortable until you get used to it. And then it becomes part of your comfort zone because now you're used to it. And then you have another one to step through. So I just think like, yes, I'm glad that you said you're going to continue running it, but also I just feel this energy in the air ever since, specifically like very potently and powerfully since August 1st. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I know this is for me, like, what are you waiting for? Honestly, what are any of us waiting for anymore as we watch the world shift at rapid speed and we watch our comfort zone start to be taken away from us? I'm not talking about by the elites. I mean, like, like as things change, right? Like kind of like you having the crutch kicked out from you. Like that wasn't, some bad person that did that to you. You can see it that way, but that's not a powerful way of seeing it. It's like, oh, that comfort, that little aspect of your comfort zone was removed by the evolution of consciousness that's happening here. And you were able to harness it so that you can move forward powerfully in the direction that you are always destined to go. And I feel like that's what's happening for all of us. Like we are not the old world is gone. So let's stop sitting around and telling ourselves stories about like, oh, I don't have the money or I don't have the time, right? Maybe next year I don't have the clarity, I don't have the ideas. Like there are so many things that I didn't have the clarity on before I decided to work with Viola. And P.S. I had over $100,000 in debt when I signed on with Viola. And then paying her meant that I was still living at the same quality of life that I did as a broke student midwife living off of student loans because it was like, even though I was making good money, but like I ponied up the dough and that was what was required for me to actually move forward. If I had worked with her for free, I would not have implemented shit. Do you understand? It was because it was such an edge for me. It was so edgy and uncomfortable that like, and my brain was telling all kinds of stories about being irresponsible and like, what the fuck am I doing? And like, oh my God, if my parents knew and, all my things were being triggered. But I was like, well, you've done it. You've committed to doing this work now. So now you have to do it. You have to put your money where your mouth is, basically. And that's what's required. And like I'm telling you, if we don't just decide that we're doing this and then step forward into it in whatever capacity we're capable of doing, but also like with a stretch that makes us uncomfortable and gives us incentive to follow through, then we're just going to sit around and cycle around forever in our old patterns until they are literally taken away from us by the changes that we are witnessing around us right now. So why not just like, you know, get get with get with the forward momentum of this evolutionary journey we're experiencing collectively, and step onto your path powerfully now and know that it's going to be uncomfortable, and that doesn't mean that you're making the wrong decision.
Yeah. Comfort is your enemy. And this is not my quote, but I'll just say this, that if you want to do something and you're feeling the pull to do something, and what's holding you back is a cost, what you need to actually evaluate is the cost of being in the exact same place that you are right now, 1 year from now. Because whatever quote unquote cost or amount of money that's holding you back right now in this moment, being in the exact same spot in 365 days is going to cost you way more. It's going to be way more to just stay the same and to be like, oh, I could have started a year ago. Like I keep telling myself like, oh, since I haven't started, that's not why I haven't made it to my goal. But then you keep not starting. That was always something that I kept thinking. I'm like, oh, I didn't get into the coaching space, before it blew up. So therefore, why even start? But like, it's just now like it actually is just now starting. So don't believe the lies that your ego tells you about what you're capable of in terms of not just skills or learning or in your business, but also what you're capable of manifesting when it comes to the money that you need to invest in yourself. And yeah, it does take putting your money where your mouth is for you to actually make shit happen. Because if you do get something for free, you don't appreciate it. And that I just know that for myself. Like if I sign up for a free masterclass by somebody, chances of me going or watching the replay are like very small. But if I paid, you bet your ass I'm going to be there live. You know what I'm saying? There's a different energy when you pay to play. And so don't sell yourself short by like only doing things that are free. Like, like trust yourself enough to go all like whole ass in. when you when you stay in your comfort zone and at all costs, you're like, no, I'm staying in my comfort zone. What you don't realize is that you become complacent and then you can't grow and you can't expand your reach or your impact or your income. Like that's it. You are where you are. Nothing is actually going to land in your lap or be delivered to you on a silver platter. You have to go get it. And to me, rising into a higher octave of yourself, which is what I call goddess status, is how you expand in every way possible. And so if you're feeling like, yeah, I want to be the best version of myself, then do whatever it takes to get on that path and to get on that journey, and don't wait.
Totally. And I'll like the final thing that I'll say about it too is that I had this message come through, this transmission come through a while ago that is, it is the sorceress journey. But one piece of that transmission was like, we have a responsibility to do this. We have, so, whatever, if you're listening and you're like, okay, but yeah, okay, great, guys, but I'm not actually an entrepreneur. Well, all right, fine. But you have some growth edge that is your next, it's the next step for you to truly liberate yourself from the ways that we have been, kind of like like we've all been hijacked, and we have a responsibility to step into that. We have a responsibility to do it, even when it is uncomfortable, because the time has come now where, you know, we are we're reclaiming a lot of power, and we are learning to channel a lot of power. And so, you know, spending our money, spending our life force energy, our creative manifestation potential on, you know, safe decisions within a framework of feeling victimized by the false matrix, that is, I'm trying to think of exactly how to put it without also sounding like offensive and rude, but it's like that is playing into exactly what they want us to do.
I mean, just look at Neo.
Yeah.
When
Right.
when he came out of the you know, whatever the fuck it's called, that was uncomfortable as fuck. Like, can you even imagine? You're like in a fantasy simulation where like everything tastes amazing and like, you know, life is great. And then all of a sudden you're like in the fucking end of the world in a crazy ship and you're like, whoa, this is reality. Like that shit's uncomfortable.
Yeah. It
But
like wake up
but
everywhere.
exactly. But you know what? What would you rather do? Like be player one or in like God mode or just like be a copper top for the rest of your life?
100%. So, so good. Mic drop.
Um, and I don't say that. I say that with love.
Yeah.
That was Kali.
Yes, with so much love and the recognition that, you know, the things that hold us into the false matrix feel very real and very intense. And it is hard to emancipate ourselves. But the time is now, if not now, when?
Totally.
Yeah. Well, goddess, I love you so much. I've
I love you.
I loved having this conversation with you and just hearing, yeah, more about you and your journey and what brought you to be the powerful, badass priestess, goddess, sorceress that you are now, that I know and love now. So,
Thank you for having me. I love you so much too. And it's truly like a joy to serve you and support you. You make it easy.
that this huge smile. You can't see it, but my smile is so huge right now. And thank you, beautiful listeners. After we, you know, kind of like barraged you at the end there, hopefully you felt like it was a motivational barrage of, you know, goddess fierceness. But as always, I just appreciate that you're here with us at all and that you're listening and you're present and you are open to any of these concepts. And the power of your currency is your attention is everything. So thank you and have a beautiful day or night wherever you are, my friends. And I will catch you on the next episode.
Whether you are just starting out on your spiritual awakening journey or you're ready to dive deep into activating your psychic gifts, I have a complete store ready for you to learn all the things that you are looking for answers to. I have light codes to upgrade and calibrate your consciousness. I have a class on the first 13 dimensions, a class on dark entities, a class on the human ego from a multidimensional perspective, and powerful modules and bundles on psychic activation, with more classes and courses being added all the time. In fact, I just added 3 classes about the Christ light frequency and the holographic field that have been selling like wildfire, and I get a ton of messages from people who appreciate this content. I truly love to serve you all, and I do my best to translate all the downloads and transmissions I receive from the Akashic Records into this library of information for you. You can find it all at amybelair.com/store. Enjoy.